Hey everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. Yes, I know this is weird. I'm here on a Friday and I want to wish every single one of you a happy, fun Friday, the beginning of the weekend for many of us. I hope it is fun. I know I'm about to have some fun, so why am I here? Well, yesterday was the first block that was dropped on the Jolly Jabbers, which is Fat Quarter Shop's blog, their first blog for the first block of the Best Friends Quilt Along, as Vicki Holloway from My Creative Corner 3 and myself are sewing together. It's so much fun, having a ball, but the first block was dropped. Now, if you're not sure what the Best Friends Quilt Along is, Fat Quarter Shop is putting on a sew along that you can do with your best friend. Your best quilty friend. You can do it with a guild, with your bee. You can do it by yourself or with many. And even though you're doing it by yourself, you don't have to be in the same place. Vicki and I are states apart and we're having a ball doing this together. But the first block was dropped yesterday in the Jolly Jabber. I'll put a link down below so you can take a little peek at what they talked about. And I believe later on today, they will be talking about it in their Friday video, which is at 9 a.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, if those are your time zones. So at any rate, the first block was dropped, and I'm just here to give a little bit of tips and tricks, or my perspective and what I see and how I'm doing it, because each of us have a different methodology and it just might speak to you. So couple of things I wanted to talk about. So the first block is the log cabin, and I just super love the log cabin block. And if y'all can remember, I did the royal barn raising. Love me some log cabin. But this is all foundation paper piece. This entire quilt is foundation paper piece, and you can get those papers super awesome on the Fat Quarter Shop. They are, they do sell the log cabin block in paper piecing. Now, anytime I start a new block I've never done before, maybe I'm doing, like I've never used their paper before and I've never done a log. I've done it only by just standard piecing, traditional piecing. I've never done the log cabin in a way that was done with foundation paper piecing. So because of all this new stuff, I went ahead and did a practice block. It's just what I do anytime there's something new, or maybe it's even something that I haven't done in a while. Might not be new to me, but it's definitely something I've, been a little while. So I want to make sure my skills are up to par. So this is my practice block. So I encourage practice blocks, and you get plenty of paper. They give 42 log cabin paper pieced papers when you buy their package of log cabin. I know you probably can't see this, but they do have papers, and it comes with 42, so you have plenty to do a practice run with. But there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. The first one is, if you are cutting, instead of like from pre-cuts, maybe a 10-inch stacker or honey buns, whatever. If you're cutting from yardage and you build your own strips, I always, like on this one, okay, let's say you're cutting 8-inch strips within your strips. So you get your yardage out, you go ahead and cut, maybe they're 2-inch wide, so you cut 2-inch strips, then you need 8 inches, then you might need 6, 5, 4, whatever. I always start with the largest one, okay? So let's say I was cutting 8-inch strips of the 1 or 2-inch strip that I cut from yardage. Let's say I needed 10 of them. I will cut as many as I can get out of that strip. Okay, so if it was 8-inch, it would be 5, and I don't know that I'd have anything left. But if I did, and I needed a small one, maybe I needed a 1.5-inch square, if I can fit that at the end, then I tag it there. I just keep cutting those ones. The next one I go down. let's say I needed 6 inches. I cut as many as I can. So maybe I'm getting 5 in a strip whole. After that, I'll go, what do I need smaller? If I can get that, what do I need smaller than that? And I utilize that small part that's left over from the larges before I cut those small pieces or those smaller strips or squares out of those strips. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Always start with the largest first. Your fabric will go further that way. And if you're anything like me, you want to stretch that fabric so that you have more money to buy more fabric, right? Right. So that was the first thing I wanted to share. The second thing I wanted to share is about a light source. So when you do foundation paper piecing, everybody talks about a light source, and they do have light boxes out there and they look really cool. I don't have one yet. It's on the bucket list. So what do I use? Now, some people talk about a window. Well, believe it or not, I don't use a window either. I just simply, and I'm going to throw a picture up here in just a bit, but I just simply take my fabric with my paper and I hold it up where there's going to be a light shown in, okay? It doesn't have to be a window. It can be the light just somewhere where I can see. And I'll throw the picture up here so you can actually see what I'm seeing, because I know you're not going to be able to do that. It's amazing the shadow that is created. You can see all the lines on the front of the paper, and on the back of the paper is my fabric. So it gives me a nice shadow to make sure that I'm getting that fabric where I want it to go. Okay, and I've got some other methods, but I wanted to talk about that light source because you don't need the window. You can use a window. You can use a glass table with a flashlight underneath it. So you're kind of like making your own light box. You can do that. Or you can just hold up the paper like I do, making sure there's some sort of light in the background, and it'll allow you to see that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was what stitch length. I actually used to use 1.8 a lot, and I don't know if it's the different paper or what it is, but I am now using a 1.6 on the stitch length, and you want to make sure you lower it from that normal. Anywhere, I wouldn't go much lower than 1.6, and 2 might be too high. You want it, what it does is it allows that perforation in the paper so it's easy to pull. If you go too high, so let's say you're at 2.5, it will make it so that your threads are really loose and your seams won't hold well, okay? Or you might even, as you're tearing the paper, because it's so loose, you might tear the seam and have to fix it. So I use a 1.6 now. If you get too small, so let's say you go 1.2, it might be too much and you're going to perforate the paper before you're ready. So then all of a sudden you have 2 pieces of paper and you're trying to sew 1 block. So there's a range in there, and I would play with your own. So when you do your practice block, start with 1.8 and work down and see what's going to be the best advantage for you. Again, I'm using 1.6 now. As far as foundation paper piecing, it's fun. It really is. It's a lot of fun, which is another reason why I want to call this Happy Fun Friday, because foundation paper piecing on a Friday is nothing but a bunch of fun. But it's, you gotta wrap just a little bit of your head around it. And trust me, when I sat down, I haven't foundation paper pieced in a few months, and I had to sit, I ain't gonna lie to y'all, I went back and watched my video. Because like, okay, what am I doing here? How is this working? It just takes an initial start, and then you get in this momentum, and it's so much fun. Absolutely fun. But if you have never foundation paper pieced, I do have 2 videos. The first video I'm going to share right here, the link for, it's pretty extensive. It's all it is about foundation paper piecing, and I take you through a pattern, and you can actually get that pattern for free. You can print it off, and you can play with that before you start your log cabins or anything else that you're deciding to do within this pattern, the Best Friends Quilt Along. So I'll put that link. The second one I did a teacup with the bookshelf quilt. And so I'll put that link here, and it just gives you kind of ideas on how it might work. So that might be enough for you, and that would be great too. But if you've never foundation paper piece, those are a couple of ideas that I will share with you now. What I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to bring you in closer. The first piece is always, that's usually where you got to wrap your head around stuff. So what I have done, I'm going to do the first couple pieces with you, and I've got a couple here that I haven't finished to give you some other tips and tricks that I have found work wonders for me. And so I'm going to bring you in closer to do that. But some of the things you're going to need, of course, is your paper. You're going to have your strips already cut, which you can get from the pattern. And I'm going to use a marking tool. I'm going to use a little bit of glue, and I'm going to use some pins, and my ultimate favorite, the add a quarter ruler. I'll talk about that. But if you don't have this ruler, I'm going to show you on a regular ruler how to cut the seams. And I'll show you the difference. This is my go-to. So from here, after I show you this, from here on out, I'm only going to use this, because this is, in foundation paper piecing, this is a gem. And you can find this at Fat Quarter Shop, and I also carry them in my shop too. So either one would work great if you're interested in purchasing. As far as the glue goes, it's an unnecessary. You can completely use pins. So I don't want you to think you have to go out and buy all this stuff, because you don't. You can make do as we always do, because us quilters are phenomenal at being resourceful. We come up with all kinds of tricks of our own to make things work. So don't worry about that, but I am going to pull you in now, and I'm going to talk about these different things, and we're going to go through the first steps and go through a couple of other tips and tricks, and then I will be back after that to talk a little bit more. So I'll see you in a sec. Okay, if y'all will notice, I have I have three different piles here. I've got my foundation paper piece log cabin, and looking at this, you have white blocks and you have gray blocks. The gray blocks are the printed fabric, or your darker fabrics, the things that are not background. The white blocks are your background fabrics. Now ours happened to be, Vicki and I had chosen to do a solid white background, so that's going to go in all the whites, and our colors over here are our printed fabrics, and they're going to go in all the green. When I cut my strips and I cut up all my sizes, I make a pile of these, I make a pile of these, and I make a pile of those, etc., etc. Then I take it and I make a kit basically for each block. So that's what you're seeing. This is my kit. Then, because I don't like to think, and I make mistakes when I have to think, I know that my first block is going to be a printed block, and my second block is going to be a background. I can see that on the pattern, but sometimes I forget. So this is my first, this is my second, and my third. This is what I do. Then I take the next two. It's 2x2s, guys. Then I take the next two. And then I take the next two. Then I take the last two and the last two of the printed. Now, the first block I'm going to show you every week, because that is the one you have to stop and wrap your head around. Once you get in past the first block, it's a momentum, things become fun, but that first block can throw you off. This is my first block, okay? This is that's the right side, and this is the wrong side, okay? So I want my right side to be facing towards me. And I want it to fit in this white, in this gray block labeled number 1. And when you do it, you want to try and line it up so that it's got a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Does it have to be perfect? No. That's the beauty behind foundation paper piecing. It does not have to be perfect. But you do want at least a 1/4 inch all the way around. And you're going to want to flip your paper over. Now I can see where my lines are, so I'm going to attempt to line it up, but then like I showed you earlier, I'm going to throw it up into a light, and I'm going to try and find the 1/4 inch all the way around. Does it have to be perfect? Does it have to be straight? Absolutely not, but you just want it to stay. At this point, I want it to be in the middle, so I'm going to grab my glue pen. Okay, now you can use a pin. You do not have to use glue, but I am going to use glue because I have it. And I'm going to throw this up into the light. Make sure that I'm a 1/4 inch all the way around. And I can actually see the lines underneath. And I'm going to throw some glue. I'm going to throw it up in the light again to make sure I'm good. Once I am good, or where I want it to land, a 1/4 inch everywhere around, I'm going to put it down the table and I'm going to press on this square to make sure the glue holds. Now you could pin at this point. You don't have to use glue. The next thing I'm going to do, we're going to stitch along this line. We're going to add block 2 to block 1. But to be sure that I'm going to get everything lined up correctly, I am going to pin along the line. And I'm going to flip it over. Okay? The next block, if you look, is a light color. It's my background. Now, if you'll notice, I actually use some of the selvage along here because it's going to be in the seam, so it's not going to matter. And normally what I do is I use this add a 1/4 ruler and I line it up. This is where my line is, so I line it up. And I look to see how much I have, okay? If you don't have that, no worries. You can take a ruler and line up your 1/4 inch line with the pin. Now, I have never paper pieced cutting strips to exact size. This is a new one for me. So I marked a line. That's where my 1/4 inch is going to go. I'm going to take my number 2 piece and I'm going to line it up right along there. I'm going to take my pin and I'm going to pin where I'm not going to sew, which is another abnormality. Normally I pin closer, but I don't want my feed dogs to have a problem. So I'm going to pin just to hold it in place. I'm going to take this pin out because I'm going to sew along this line. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine. And if y'all remember, this is always fun for me because I can't really see. But I'm going to take my hand wheel and I'm going to lower it right where I want to start. Put my presser foot down. Now, I do have a pin here, but it should not interfere with my feed dogs. I'm going to hold on to my thread line up that line, and I'm going to start sewing. 1, 2, 3. Now, typically, I was not in the past doing any kind of back stitching, but now it's a habit, so I am back stitching just so it holds. And I'm going to stitch along that line. When I get to the end, I'm going to back stitch, and I'm going to cut threads. Okay? At this point, I do a little snip of the extra thread. Doesn't have to be crazy. I'm going to flip the paper over, take the pin out, and I'm going to flip this up, and I'm going to pull it up to the light again, and I'm going to make sure that I'm at least a 1/4 inch around. When I flip it up, I want to make sure around this block that that piece I just sewn is a 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay? These other 3 sides before I cut. And it is. So I'm going to flip this back down. I'm going to fold, I'm going to flip it up so I can see the numbers. I'm going to fold this down along that seam line. And I'm going to take my add a 1/4 ruler, which I absolutely love, and I'll cut any seams. Now, if you do not have an add a 1/4 ruler and you just have a regular ruler, you want to put your 1/4 inch seam along that line. Now, you got to be careful because it's slippy when you have just a regular ruler, okay? But you're going to want to take it, line up on that 1/4 inch, and then you're just going to cut. Now from here on out, now I didn't have anything because it was pretty measured pretty well. I just had literally scraps. So I'm going to pull that off. I did 1 and 2. I'm going to flip it back over, and I'm going to press this. Now when you press, you want your iron hot, but you do not want steam. Do not put steam on paper. All right. So I have pressed it. Now we want to go to number 3. Now this is white, so if you didn't put your pile together like I did, you'll have to pay attention. But my next one's white, and this is white. And I'm going to sew this line right here. So I'm going to take a pin, and I'm going to pin it along that line, okay? And actually, there we go, okay? I'm going to flip it over, and now I have a nice little line. Now I can see through the paper, and I can see that my 2 lines for number 3 are here, and on the top is right here. However, I'm still going to hold it up to the light. I'm going to take my add a 1/4 ruler. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to take my mark. This is a disappearing ink marker, so it will disappear. And this is going to be in my seam, so it's not that big of a deal. I'm going to take the next strip. And if this strip was not a solid, you want it to be wrong sides together. Okay? I'm sorry, right sides together. So what should be facing you should be facing, wrong side should be facing up. You want to line it up along this line that you have drawn. Hold it in place. And we're going to pin it. You do not have to be perfect. Again, we're going to take this out, and I'm going to stitch right along this line. I use my hand wheel to lower where I want it to start. Lower my presser foot, hold on to the thread. I'm going to stitch, and I am going to back stitch. Okay, I'm going to hold on to this thread and just stitch along that line between 1 and 2 and 3. When you get up to where you've stitched before, you kind of want to catch it if you can. When you get down to the end, do a little back stitch and cut threads. Pull it on over, snip that extra amount of thread, flip this over, pull out the pin. Okay, we're going to flip this up, and I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to make sure in my light that I'm at least a 1/4 inch around this area. Okay, and I am, but I want to make sure before I cut. And I'm going to do this one more time with you guys. It is a 1/4 inch around number 3. So I'm going to fold, I'm going to put this where the numbers are facing me. I'm going to fold over on that line. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to cut off any extra of the seam. Okay. And now I'm going to take this to the pressing board. Now it doesn't look like much. I totally agree with you. But that's after pressed. And if we look, we're going to do number 4. So again, I'm going to do one more with you. I'm going to put a pin in along that line. Okay? I put a pin right here. We're going to number 4. This is the line I'm going to stitch. I put a pin in it. When I flip it over, I've got a line here that tells me where my stitch line is. I'm going to take my add a 1/4 ruler or my regular ruler. I'm going to take my marking pen, and I don't normally do this marking pen thing. I absolutely love it though. But because these strips are a certain size, I don't want to be short. This is my right side. This is my wrong side. We're going to put right sides together. I'm going to line it up along that line. Okay. And I know that my lines are right here for number 3. I want to make sure that these are at least a 1/4 inch, and you can hold it up to the light to see. You will see a shadow, and if you're good to go, I'm going to put a pin in it where it's not going to affect my stitch line, and it's not going to get involved with my feed dogs, just to hold it in place. That's all it's doing. I'm going to turn it over, take out the pin I'm going to stitch along that line. I'm going to take it and I'm going to stitch along the number 4 in between 1 and 3. Because we're just keep adding. Once I figure out where I'm going to stitch, I lower my presser foot. Okay, hold on to this thread. I'm going to stitch along this line right here. Now I did 3 stitches. I'm going to back stitch a little bit, and then I'm going to just stitch along it. And the key is You want to look along the line. You do not want to look at your needle. You want to look along that line and make sure that you're stitching on the line. And don't look at the needle, look at the line. When you get to the end of the line, back stitch just a little bit and cut threads. Pull it on over. Take off a little extra of the thread. Take out the pin. Flip it up, okay? Hold it up to the light. Make sure before you start cutting that you are at least a 1/4 inch. And I am, so I'm going to put it down where the numbers are facing me. I'm going to fold along that stitch. Take my add a 1/4 ruler or my regular ruler. Now this one has a little extra, see it? I'm just going to cut it off. Then I'm going to take this to the pressing board. Without steam. Make sure you do not use steam. It looks kind of funky, but I promise you it's going to end up. So we did 4, so the next one is 5. So I'm going to put my pin in as straight as I can. Okay, along that line, I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to take my ruler I'm going to mark a line, and I'm going to take the next strip, which should be a color. We have color, background, background, color, color, background, background, color, color, background, background, color, color, over and over. But I want the right side to face down. And I'm actually going to use these guys as my guidance on making sure that I'm at least a 1/4 inch. I'm going to hold it in place. I'm going to put a pin in it to hold it down. And take this pin out, and I'm going to stitch along this line. Now I'm not going to go through with it on this time, but over and over, this is what you're going to do. Over and over. You're going to repeat this method over and over and over until you have the whole thing done. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get this block done, and I'll show you how to trim it. This paper's really nice about that. So I'm going to go ahead and go around and around, right sides together, making sure that it's a 1/4 inch beyond all the lines of that block that I'm stitching. Till I get to 13, I'm going to do number 13 and I'm going to trim it. So I'm going to come back at you when I get this done. But it's easy as that, and you get into such a momentum, guys. This is totally fun. It really is. And all your points are going to come out. Everything's going to look pretty. So I'll come back at you in just a second. Okay, so I'm on the last block. I'm on number 13. Okay, so I've put my pin in to give me guidance. I put my ruler up here. I drew myself a little line because nothing's perfect. It doesn't have to be with foundation paper piecing. I've laid my last strip right side down, wrong side up. Now notice I have 2 pins, and that's because I just wanted it to stay and it's a little longer. The brilliance behind this is this strip is actually longer than the paper, so I can make sure that I get the seam in at least on these 2 sides. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch along here. So I'm going to pull this pin out, and I'm going to put it underneath, and this particular one goes edge to edge. Put my presser foot down, hold on to my thread, put 3 stitches. I'm going to back stitch a couple times. I'm going to stitch right along that line. That's all it is. Again, it makes it easier if you look at the line ahead of you and not where your needle is. Try to capture what you've stitched before if you come along one of those intersections. When you get to the end, you don't have to, but I do a little back stitch. Cut threads. Flip it over. I'm going to take these pins out. Doesn't look pretty. Pull this out. I'm going to put this up to the light. Make sure it is, because if it isn't, guys, you're going to want to rip your seam. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. Mine's actually really good. So I'm going to go ahead and press it. And then what I'm going to do with you guys is I'm going to go ahead and trim this. Before I do, I want to show you. Look how pretty that is, guys. So, what's really cool about this paper, they actually tell you trim on this line, do not trim on this line. This is your 1/4 inch seam that goes all the way around this block, okay? So you do not want to trim on that first line. You want to trim on that outer line. I take my ruler, and I have one that has dotted lines so I can see really, really well. And I'm going to line it up. And I do my best to line up down here along with here. And I lined it, the bottom one up on the wrong one. So I'm just going to make sure you have that inside line. Inside line. There we go. You want to have, you're going to have paper left over. That's how you know you're on the right one. You're going to take your rotary cutter and you're just going to simply cut. Okay? You're going to go ahead and turn it. Again, line up on the inside lines. Rotary cutter. It's not exactly perfect, and I could get it exactly perfect, and I probably will, because I'm going to send them to Vicki, who's going to put this together. But I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes. Just get it all cut up. And we're going to flip it around here in just a second. It's absolutely a great day. And there you have it. Another block finished. And it's exactly 6.5. Your points are absolutely gorgeous. Everything works out. And eventually you're going to pull this off. And let me show you how easy it is. Look, guys. It's that easy. Yeah, you can have your friends help you. You can have a night where you sit down in front of Netflix and you can pull your papers. Now, if you have anything like here, let me keep going because I'm going to show you something. Just want to make sure. I don't think I have my tweezers available, but once you get into the inside, you have a couple of options. You can take your There we go. Seam ripper. Mr. Jack is your friend at this point. Now you don't want to go through the fabric. Okay, but you can get it started to get that pulled. And if you have anything left over in the seam, you just simply take your tweezers and you can pull it out. Every paper is different that you will use, so you'll find that sometimes they leave it and sometimes it doesn't, but it's not hard, guys. This is super easy to pull off. And you just want to, look, there it is. Now see, this might get stuck. It might not once I pull this piece off. Let's see what happens. Oh, no, it's going to stay. So what I'll do is I'll take some tweezers and I'll pull that little piece out. I bet you I can do it with my fingers. It'll work better with tweezers, but yeah, that's all you're going to do is just rip out all the paper, which comes off really easy. Throw it all away, and you've got your beautiful block all finished. So those are my tips and tricks. I'll see y'all in just a sec. So there we have it, some little bit of tips and tricks that I thought I'd share with you on this first fun Friday for the best friends quilt along with the Fat Quarter Shop, Kimberly Jolly and Lori Holt of Be in Your Bonnet. So just one more thing I wanted to mention. The fabric choice that Vicki and I did was Ombre Fairy Dust Metallic, and it's by V & Co. for Moda Fabrics. And the background fabric is Bella Solid Super White. If you're looking for some fabric ideas, there's a couple of things I wanted to share. First and foremost, Fat Quarter Shop had put together some kits. I'm not sure if they have any left, but you may want to check in that blog. Go to necessary items. I do know that they have, again, a kit put together using Lori Holt's Riley Blake fabric. Really darling, super cute, absolutely love it. And another thing in that first initial blog, there are 11 people mentioned that are doing this all together. You might want to check out what fabric they used. That might also give you some inspiration for this quilt along. But yeah, that's where we got, guys. That is the log cabin first block. We will be back here next Friday. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to drop them down below. You can email myself. You can go to My Creative Corner 3 and ask Vicki any questions that you may have. We're both here having a lot of fun doing it and want to make sure you're having a lot of fun doing it. So any questions at all, don't hesitate. Also, I will be on live today because anytime I drop a video on YouTube, I always go live at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a live Q&A. So if you have any questions at that point, I'll be there to answer those and have a little more fun this Friday. But until next time, and until next fun Friday with the Best Friends Quilt Along with Fat Quarter Shop, I will see you then. And until next time, may y'all continue to be inspired, productive, and joyful, and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. I love y'all. See y'all soon.